Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Fundamentalists podcast. Welcome. I'm here with my friend Pete. If you don't understand what that is in reference to, folks, that was my attempt at the NPC trend. And I'm here. We're going to discuss this as we always do when it is at the height of the cultural conversation. About give or take a month or two, and Pete had this idea to talk about the NPC trend. If you're not familiar, there is a social media app called TikTok where a lot of young people and older people will get in online and they'll share short videos, and sometimes they're very entertaining. And what TikTok really is it is a haven for trends, spur of the moment trends that take off and become cultural topics of the conversation for a second, and then off they go into the ether. And this one is particularly interesting.
I thought you were going to say it's an arm of the Chinese government. That's what I thought you were going to say.
Oh, and
TikTok
it does spy on you.
Yeah.
And it was taking all of your information, apparently.
Yeah.
I do not do TikToks. I do enjoy a TikTok here and there. The NPC trend is very strange, and NPC stands for non-playable character, so it's a reference from video games. If you're not familiar with video games, an NPC is a type of character who has a pre-written script that when you talk to them, they can't really deviate much from it because they are not real characters. They're just sort of around the town or whatever. You walk up, you say something, and maybe you walk away for a second, and you go back, and they'll say the exact same thing because they're not that in-depth. They're NPCs. There's nothing really going on there. And so these people will kind of do these TikToks, and they'll respond to gifts that are given. So a little background information. First of all, Pete, how you doing?
I'm good. I've realized that I look a bit messy. I need to get my hair cut. But yes, life is good.
Good.
Yep, that's pretty much my catch-up.
That's great. And that was really good. And Peter Rollins, everybody. So the TikTok trend, supposedly, this information comes from one of my favorite YouTubers one of the only YouTubers I still watch or do watch. He's also a neighbor, humble brag. Nick
Ooh.
Is Not Green, and he does these really fun Gen Z online journalist videos, and I find him to be very smart and funny, so shout out to him. He was informing me that the TikTok trend most likely had its genesis back in 2022 by a creator from Japan named Natu Koko, who would kind of get online, do something very similar to the NPC trend, but it didn't blow up until the famed Pinky Doll video got famous. And Pinky Doll has been accused, supposedly, of stealing the trend from Natu Koko, but Pinky Doll says no, she just merely popularized it. And I would agree with Nick that, who cares? And so Pinky Doll would do these videos for 6 hours a day, 7 days a week. And she basically lost, I believe it was a cleaning company that she was working with her mom on. It fell by the wayside. She needed a way to make money for her daughter, I believe, or at least her child. We can keep it broad strokes. And so she started getting on TikTok, and originally she was making about $250 a day, which is still a significant amount for any kind of live streamer, but it blew up. And Pinky Doll eventually started getting 20 to 40,000 live viewers per 6 hours a day, and that equated to up to $7,000 a day. And she would do this by sitting in front of a camera for hours and saying the same things over and over again that aligned with the gifts that were given by the viewers. So the viewer gets to send a diamond or a hot dog or whatever these little things are, these little emojis that you pay for, and the creator gets half a cent per whatever gift it is. And so you can imagine that you have to amass an extremely high amount of viewers, an extremely high amount of gifts in order for that to make any sense. People have talked about the psychological appeal to this. They say that it is just a sporadic dopamine triggering reward that keeps people hooked, similar to all forms of social media. It has been called kind of a dumbing down of basically all of the live stream gift dynamic, where a live streamer will make their money based off of gifts from their viewers. And so this is just stripping all of that down to the bare minimum. And as a result, she's getting her money, and she's able to support her family by doing something that is very weird. But we're going to talk about the philosophical or psychoanalytic version of it.
That was very good. Wow, well done. That was
I
read that
really
Wikipedia article well.
Yeah, dude, that's my own notes.
Yeah, that was very good. I'm very impressed. Who's the podcaster, by the way? Your neighbor? I'm interested in him.
Yeah, Nick is not green.
Nick is not green. Okay.
Yeah, he's great. I discovered him and then saw him walking around my neighborhood, and I was like, I DM'd him, and I was like, dude, I think we're buds, because he had followed me back in the day, and I have a lot of respect for the kid. He's so young and he's so smart, and that's what you like. You like to see the youngins be cool, and he's done some really funny videos too.
Very good. Well, here, before we go on to the NPCs in the way you're talking, there was another way the term was used that was political that I thought was interesting as well. Just as you were talking, I remember.
I love this way of using it.
Yeah, it was like, it must have been a couple of years ago where I heard the phrase where an NPC is somebody who basically parrots whatever the big other, whatever the societal common sense is, without kind of critical thinking. And I thought,
Yes.
oh, that's a very clever use of the term.
So good, dude. When I heard it used I heard it used in relation to, like, you talk to someone and they just spout Fox News talking points all the time, and you can tell that they're just fed programming. Like, they come off like they're programmed, and it does sound very often like you're not talking. It feels like you're not talking to a real person. Not that that's exclusive to one side of the political spectrum, because certainly there are people you can talk to, especially in LA, who are doing the same thing. We're like, oh, you're not a real. There's nothing going on there behind the eyes.
Well, that's funny, because I heard it primarily used by conservatives about progressives, but you're saying
really
primarily. Oh yeah, that's where I first heard it. But you can kind of.
Was that when you were in? Was that when you were in your Russell Brand chat room, your Discord, your Russell Brand?
That's when I was in my 4chan. That was when I was in my 4chan group.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, Russell Brand. It's a very topical one to talk about.
Yeah, it's too topical.
Yeah, too topical
in a
for
month.
us. Yes, exactly. We're like a little mini version of Hegel. Hegel famously said, "The owl of Minerva spreads her wings at dusk," which means basically that philosophy is best when it comes in after the dust has settled, after something has happened. You know, philosophy is not good at the beginning to predict things, whatever, but once everything's done. So the fact that we're doing NPCs when probably the trend is over is very on brand and very, I think, philosophically good. So there you go.
We're doing a great job. And if we want to mimic the NPC thing, people can always sign up at patreon.com/the Fundamentalists, because we will do even less there than the NPC people do, and I think that there's value in that. So.
Oh, I know.
That's not true.
I feel eternally bad about our Patreon.
It takes 2 seconds. There's 5 people in there. We'll be all right.
That's good. Okay, we're good. And we're back. This is our 3rd one in a row. I'm very excited about this.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. So that use of the NPC, which is not what we're talking about necessarily, or we may, but it is interesting, the idea that we can be mouthpieces for ideas that are in the ether, that are kind of like given by corporations or news systems, news media, and we don't actually kind of subjectively think about it ourselves. We just pass it on as if it's kind of gossip, and that just feels. I think we did a podcast on Kierkegaard and gossip one time, I remember, and I think we talked about how, you can say something that you believe, or you can say something that somebody else believes, or you can say something that is just kind of like, I can't remember how Kierkegaard said it, but it's like in news where you kind of pass on. You don't believe it, and you're not saying anybody. You're just saying people say, they say, it is said, and this is where you don't take responsibility for what you're saying. Nobody else is really taking responsibility, but you're still passing it on, and so in a way you're a non-playing character, because you're not subjectively invested in what you're doing at all. Just like in those prayer wheels, where you can literally put a prayer in a wheel and turn the wheel and it prays for you, and you can be looking at pornography or something. Doesn't matter subjectively. The
You're
prayer...
done talking about bingo? I think that's bingo.
That's bingo. Maybe
what are you talking
actually.
about? I've never heard of it.
Yeah, I think you get that the prayer wheel is an Islamic thing. You also get it in some forms of Orthodoxy and Christianity, not the prayer wheel, but the idea that there's an objective dimension to faith, so you don't have to be even. It's not true of Pascal. This isn't a great reading of Pascal, but he says if you don't believe, just kneel and pray. You don't have to subjectively believe it, objectively engage with it, and that's a common idea you see in some ancient religions, which is and very Catholic as well. Yeah, so you don't have to believe. Yes, you just do the routine. The subjectivity is kind of not that important.
Let me ask you something, Pete. I have had a sudden surge in interest about Catholicism and about that kind of objective engagement with it. And I know that is part of a trend of millennials getting back into Orthodox or some kind of religious thing. Yeah. And it happened it felt like it happened organically, where I was reading stuff and I was like, I've never been to a mass. I don't know what that's like. And it seems so interesting. And my wife grew up Catholic, and I was like, hey, let's go to a mass some Sunday, or whatever you would call it, a church that is Catholic. And she was like, it's so boring. She was like, she was like, and I think she had her like, I don't want to go back to those days of being Catholic. But why am I interested in Catholicism? It's something I'm relatively okay. What's going on? Is that part of the same thing? Am I echoing the trend of my generational anxiety?
Yeah, I mean, the trad revival is huge among kind of the left. There's various moves, and one of the moves, as you say, is the trad. And I know a lot of people I respect who have kind of gone that direction for a variety of reasons. So let me say one kind of reason. There's a few, I think, but within progressive, we've talked about this a lot before, but within kind of like a very a place where everything is possible, where, as Lacan says, if God is dead, nothing is impossible. I.e., there's just you can do whatever you want, but it actually causes huge amounts of anxiety and subjective anxiety, burnout, fatigue, etc. That going into kind of traditional Orthodox religion can really help to minimize that anxiety. I mean, that's one way.
We've had to at times have conversations in our house about the dog and about putting boundaries on the dog, because when I came into the relationship, Goose had no boundaries whatsoever, and she also had a higher level of anxiety all the time because there were no rules and she could go anywhere, and she didn't have a place like a bed or enclosed space. And I was like, dogs do thrive off of some kind of like rule, like some kind of boundary, so that they can feel like they're in part of a pack and they can go into their cave. And we eventually started doing that here and there and being a little more strict with her, and she's been a lot better in recent years, and I think maybe that's part of it. And so basically I'm just like the dog.
Yes, I've thought that many times. And here's the thing about orthodoxy is like within evangelicalism, you do, subjective belief is important. In fact, it's kind of primary. The first thing you have to do is subjectively say, I believe in Jesus Christ, whatever, the kind of confession. And then you go into the objective practices. So subjective belief is very, very important. Within orthodoxy, it's really the rituals that are the most important. You belong and you behave before. So for example, in evangelicalism, you believe, behave, belong. So you subjectivize the belief. You say, I believe in God, I believe in Jesus. Then you behave, as in you pray and you repent. So you engage in that behavior that kind of countersigns the subjective affirmation. And then you belong. You enter into the community of practice. But within, say, Judaism, you have, it's just like an infant. A baby belongs before there's any belief. They belong to the family. And then becomes behavior. They engage in the behaviors of the family. They go out and walks. They play games on a Saturday night. They eat at 6:00, whatever it is. And subjective belief comes last. And at first, the kid believes everything the parents believe, and then nothing the parents believe, and then somewhere in the middle. So I think the move to the trad move as well is it's people who don't want or aren't able to embrace subjectively some of these beliefs, but want objectively a certain set of ancient practices like Freud almost says, like he says obsession is a private religion. So the anxious child doesn't step on the cracks in the pavement or touches taps the same amount of time. And a kid plays with all sorts of obsessional games that help to alleviate the anxiety of their own fragility. And so in a way, you could say that orthodoxy provides a set of practices that can feel like a balm in relation to modern society. I'm skeptical of the move, but I can understand it,
Man, you really had that locked and loaded. That was really good. That was so that's nailed it. Good stuff. I do feel like there's a way to tie this into the NPC thing.
Yes. Oh, there is. Yes. In fact,
you have the lack of subjective belief in what they're doing, just an objective thing where they're getting money. And then the person, they get a sense of control and stability because they can go, hey, say this weird thing over and over again.
No, you're absolutely right. Like, there's a real connection because what you have with the NPC, like Pinky Doll, is the whole thing is about she's not subjectively there at all. She responds to the demands of the other. She is just an instrument of the other's demand. It's a very perverse structure, actually, because the ultimate perverse fantasy is I am there utterly for the pleasure of the other. I am a vehicle for the other's pleasure. In some sort of, so in one sense, you could say it's a kind of ground zero perverse fantasy. But as you say, it's almost like I do think, and again we've talked about this, but that there is a real anxiety about engaging with the subjective dimension of the other. There's with what we can call a toxic other, because there's a toxic dimension to us all, and this NPC is a way to kind of like have pure objectivity. The other is just a doll, like Pinky Doll. The name says it. Like Pinky
right
is
there.
just it's feminine, and doll, which is like just a non-subjective, purely objective material thing that then you play with and responds to you. And yet, here's the funny thing: is like whenever NPCs break character, people get a huge amount of enjoyment from that. I haven't seen that too much, but I saw one thing with the Pinky Doll broke character once, and everybody loves that, because at the end of the day, what terrifies us is also what draws us, which is the subjectivity of the other. So deep down, we're kind of drawn to who is Pinky Doll, like what lies behind this.
Yeah, and it makes
mask.
it feel more. Her accent was so, I think, different. Like, she had a different accent when she breaks character. Like, you see the real person shine through it, because I think it was her daughter that was like getting in trouble or something, and she was like just immediately stopped. And then I'm sure the viewers get to be like, oh my gosh, we're seeing something unique and special. Another thing that I heard said was that the amount of like the retention that people have for these things, like getting 40 to 60,000 live viewers is a pretty insane number, but the retention where people aren't dropping off and they'll actually stick with the person is apparently incredibly high for this trend. And so people will, for hours, like keep watching this. So it's not like, oh, you get on and you see it for a second. It's like it hooks you really, really hard. It hooks the viewer and keeps them there for the duration of the live stream, which I think is so interesting because it's such a simple formula.
Yes. Yeah, it's I mean, there's so many interesting dimensions about it. You mentioned the dopamine hit, it's like, but what is it that, like I do think that one of the things about sexual encounters, which is always traumatic, and I think even more traumatic today, is having to talk about what turns you on, and having to kind of like navigate the weirdness of sexual dynamics, and again, if you can just kind of very safely get something sexual. I mean, this is more like OnlyFans, but you just pay, you get what you want.
Yeah.
There's no awkward conversations. Now, I don't know if that connects too much with NPCs, because it's not explicitly sexual, but there is a sexual dimension to something like
for
Pinky
sure.
Doll.
This is incredibly like kink adjacent.
Yes, yes. And I kind of wonder, I don't think I'm on the right lines here necessarily, but whenever I talk about like the ground zero kind of perverse fantasy of the other as an instrument of my pleasure, or I am an instrument of the other's pleasure, where kind of like there, then there is a sense in which that pure, the other, there is no subjective other. They literally are just doing what you want. I think there's something inherently sexual about that I think appeals to us all, not just a perverse structure, but there's something that's very appealing to that maybe it's touching on.
I think it's. I was talking to a buddy about it, and it is that like dominating sub thing, the dom sub
Yeah.
sort of situation. Except the punchline is like in, well, it's not even a punchline. Just like in those situations, the person who is seemingly the object of desire is actually the one who's like in control, because the person who's doing the NPC thing is just like raking in cash, and their mind can be anywhere else, and they have complete control over tens of thousands of people at any given moment. So it's like,
Yes.
it's weird when you see it, because you're like, oh, we're objectifying and it's strange, but they're in, like, they're doing this for a reason, and they're you know, they can stop it at any time, and then they're making more money than I am, so that's great.
Yeah, and that's very, what you say is very true in terms of sadomasochism. It is generally the masochist who is actually in control. That's the kind of, that's the secret, is that they're usually the ones who introduce their partner to it. They're usually the ones who kind of create the scenes and yet attempt to make it look like the other is in control. And then there's an interesting dynamics. I don't know if you've seen the movie Sanctuary. It's absolutely brilliant movie. Just came out last year. It's a comedy about masochism, and it's like a play. It's a two-person movie. A man who's very wealthy, and he's just inherited his father's kind of multi-million-dollar business, and then this woman who he pays to dominate her, or to dominate him, and then basically he's breaking up with her. So the whole movie, and I'm not giving anything away because this happens quite early on, but he's basically, in the nicest possible way, saying to her, we've got to stop doing this. I have to take over my father's business. And it's been really fun. And then the whole movie is about the power dynamic and the play between these two figures. Absolutely brilliant movie, definitely worth watching. But what you're saying is Pinky Doll has the power. She's acting as this powerless figure, but she's created all the rules and can kind of come out of it at any time. So it's an interesting dynamic, the power relation. Yeah.
It's interesting too, because TikTok is such a generator of these things. My understanding is that, like, if you get on TikTok and just you do a lot of content, like you create a lot of content, inevitably one of them will blow up in some way. What TikTok does differently than, say, YouTube back in my day is, and I've heard about this from like some folks who went to VidCon, which is like the Comic-Con of video entertainment, basically. And VidCon was founded by John and Hank Green, who are the Vlog brothers, and then it got bought by TikTok. And now if you go to VidCon, the YouTubers are, maybe some of them are still there, but the real thing is TikTok. It's all the TikTok creators, except apparently when they do the meet and greets, no one shows up for the TikToks, because the TikTokers, even though they amass all these millions and millions of followers, the community oriented thing, or the stuff like, I want to meet this person because I feel a relationship to them, isn't there anymore, because TikTok is so transient in nature. So I think it's interesting.
And you mentioned this because actually Elliott suggested a different possible topic, which we'll probably do next week, on parasocial relations. And we've talked about this before privately, but what you give people with SourceFed is a kind of like friends thing. It's like people got to know you, they got to hang out. Yes, how can you feel that in the same way with a TikTok dancer? Whereas instead with you guys, it's like you were sitting maybe for hours just chatting on a sofa, and even if some of it was scripted and it was like whatever, there was also a sense of I don't know, that I got to know you as a person.
Yeah, it was like a talk show more than, or like a performative, improv type talk show, variety show, more so than here is a single piece of content that has been constructed in such a way that you can't help but like watch it and share it a little bit. Like there's this thing on TikTok, dude, where, and I sometimes feel like I'm just a genius for spotting this stuff, and then I find out that it's like common knowledge the next day. But there's a thing where a lot of these TikTok videos, you'll hear hysteric laughing in the background because laughter is contagious, and so you'll hear. And I was like, I think this is fake. Like I think people are adding hysteric laughter to other videos and then reposting them because it makes it more shareable. And apparently that's exactly what was happening. It'll be like a like that kind of like gasping for air, like you just can't believe, like you're about to fall out of your chair laughter, and they'll put that faintly in the background, and then you watch it and it makes the video funnier. It's like a laugh track. It's the return of the laugh track basically, and it's just more covert, and maybe less covert because it's pretty obviously fake. So
yeah, and that reminds me of the theory, and Zizek speaks about this very well, but it's an idea that the laugh track, we often think that the laugh track is there to kind of almost like Pavlov's dog, to kind of tell us when to laugh. We're tired, we sit down, the laugh track kind of is contagious in the sense that I will start to laugh. But what I think they find is the laugh track laughs on your behalf. It laughs so you don't have to. So actually what you do is you sit down and you passively just watch a show. And so it's almost like a version of the professional crier at a funeral. The point of the crier is, in a sense, they cry for you. In a way, they're crying. Again, the subjective thing is you don't have to subjectively cry. You don't have to subjectively laugh. The show kind of laughs for you. And I wonder whether this passivity is actually very key to TikTok, because I've watched TikTok, and there's something incredibly passive about it. Like, I also remember when I was a kid, I think I preferred watching people play computer games to playing them myself. Like And I see that now as a trend on YouTube and stuff, where people will spend hours watching somebody play Minecraft. But I remember being like that. Like I would go around to someone's house and they'd go like, "Oh, do you want to play?" And I was like, you know what? I actually just love sitting here passively watching you play and taking the piss out of you, right? So
yeah.
That's an interesting thing about, again, human beings, that sometimes we. Again, we're overwhelmed, and passively having something laugh for us, having someone dance for us, having someone do these things, and we don't actually all we have to do is passively watch it, and somehow we feel we've participated in the act.
Yeah, I saw one time a clip of, I think it was Big Bang Theory, and they'd taken the laugh track out and just played it again, and it is unnerving.
Oh yeah,
to say the least. And then of course everyone goes, "Oh, see, it's not that funny without the laugh track. It's not that funny." But I think you're right. It's like even with the laugh track, you're just going like, it's just white noise in the background. Same with podcasts. People put on a podcast and they leave it in the background because it's more like you're hanging out with them. The NPC thing. I mean, are you gonna get involved in it? Are you gonna try it on your own?
That would be amazing. What would be the philosophy equivalent that I would say?
Just do like. Yeah, you'd have to just say random philosophers, wouldn't you?
Yes, philosophical ideas. God is dead. Every time somebody puts up a little skull.
God is dead. God is dead.
A little like crack would be, we are all fractured.
Yeah, you could do it. And then I don't know if folks have seen, most people, because it's been out forever, but like the way they do the body movements, I think is very funny. And I've also seen the body movement thing, the NPC thing, appear in things that aren't the NPC trend, just as part of like a TikTok thing or part of a reel on Instagram. And so it'll be like a single shot of someone who's just like doing this like movement, this swaying back and forth. Yeah. And they won't mention it. It'll just be one like frame of them doing that. And I'm like, whoa, man, we need to get the internet needs to blow up or something.
Yeah. I mean, some of this stuff does feel like you're watching some parody from the 80s. Like, remember, I think it was Running Man. the original Running Man with Arnold Schwarzenegger, like it would have these adverts of, you know, it was set in the future and it would be like some crazy thing. Or that Sylvester Stallone one, Demolition Man, and it had all of these visions of the future and weird things, and some of them are happening. Like if in Demolition Man you had an advert where you had Pinky Doll doing her thing,
it would make sense.
We would just be laughing. Like that's, you know, what a hilarious satire about the future. But it's weird.
Have you seen that the Matthew McConaughey from Interstellar meme? I think I might have sent it to you, but it's millennials looking at Gen Z on TikTok, and it's Matthew McConaughey when he starts to cry on the ship in Interstellar, and he's watching his family, but instead it's Pinky Doll, and he just starts losing it and reaching out and just being like, "What are you doing?" Oh man, it got me so good.
It's absolutely brilliant, absolutely. And you know,
there is.
Go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna say, I think there's something to it though, where it's like I trust. There's something so vapid about it that I think it's self-aware in its vapidity, and Gen Z is really good about being like, even just their fashion right now is very much the 90s are coming back, like the oversized t-shirts and oversized jeans. And I never thought that stuff would come back, even though you hear that fashion always like comes in cycles or whatever. And I'm like, it's still kind of cool. Like I like what the kids are doing, and they seem to be smart enough to be like, we're not playing this game of like this is cringe or not cringe. We're just going to do this stuff, and it is what it is. And I think that's kind of fun.
No, that's true. Like some of it is self-aware, some of it's ironic, some of it is the dream of society sedimented. And again, like that's how I look at a lot of this stuff. Is I don't look at it as good or bad as such as I look at it as the dream of the society, or one of the dreams of the society, one of the sedimentations of where we are. And sometimes it's say it's ironically done, sometimes it's sincerely done, but we can tell a lot about the world by looking at all of these trends and what's happening. And they tell us, just like when you listen to your dreams, they tell you things about yourself that you might not otherwise encounter. Like when you look at the movies and the art and the trends of a society, you kind of start to uncover, you know, how society is structured, and that's kind of fascinating. And a lot of where we are. Yeah, and a lot of this, like a lot of things I see, is the fear of the other in some respects. Have you ever seen the movie Dark City?
No.
No. Oh, it's brilliant. It's one of the best sci-fi movies I think has ever been made. I think it was around the same time as the first Matrix. I could be wrong about that, but it wasn't a well-known movie, but absolutely brilliant. Dark City.
Is this one that... No, I'm thinking something else. Describe it. What is it?
Well, I hope I'm getting the name right. So it's basically... It's a kind of noir sci-fi where human beings are being experimented on by some highly technologically advanced aliens. Now, they don't know this, and what the aliens have done is they've recreated a city like New York, and it's always dark, and at night everybody goes to sleep, and the aliens change everything. So one day you might be rich, the next day you're poor, one day you're a teacher, the next day you're a doctor, and they're doing all these weird experiments, and nobody knows that they're being experimented on. And the movie is about a guy who kind of discovers this and, you know, tries to break free. But what's really fascinating about the movie, and I recommend it to anybody, but is the premise is that this highly technologically advanced civilization is dying, and they're trying to figure out what is it that is unique about humans, or about life, human life, like say self-conscious life. They're trying to find what is the essential identity. So they're changing everything. One day you're rich, one day you're poor, one day you're good and evil, and they're trying to find what is the thing that stays. The
common denominator.
Common denominator, exactly, the common denominator. And they think that if they can locate that, this could be the key to their survival. And I love that movie because, for me, and this actually relates to, I've got a friend I think I've told you about, really good guy, but he believes we live in a simulation. Yeah. And one of his theories is that this is a simulation, one of countless simulations created by highly intelligent civilization. And one of his theories about why we live in and are a simulation is that it's basically Dark City. His theory is, and I think it might be a common theory, I'm not sure, is that this highly advanced civilization is trying to figure out what is it that all life has in common, and by running millions of simulations, they're finding out what is the essential thing that is life itself. Now, the sad thing is, these aliens, all they needed to do is read Hegel and Lacan, and they would know the answer.
Isn't that weird?
I know,
Yeah.
they don't need to do all these simulations, which is the idea that there is no, like, this is identity politics in its most philosophical form, is that there's some identity, some concrete positive thing that we are, whereas, for Hegel and Lacan, it's like, well, what you ultimately come to is that there is an ultimate mystery. There's an ultimate inability to answer that question. And that's what we share in common. We share a universal negation, a universal negative. We are all castrated. But the reason why I share that is because when I look at the NPCs, it's a way of, in a sense, trying to avoid that, what's called das Ding or object A, that dimension of the other, their desire. But at the same time, that's what we're repulsed by, and that's what we're attracted to in the other. Like, we are endlessly fascinated by the dimension of the other we don't understand. And sometimes it's sexual, right? We kind of don't understand why, say, guys, it's often guys, like that. And why is a guy attracted to that? So there's that common thing where men look at women and women look at women. And the idea is that something that often women look at is they look at another woman to go, why is she desirable? Or why is that outfit desirable? What is it that evokes a desire? But for men, and not only for men, it can sometimes be excitement and emotionality. It's like, they're around a person who responds and reacts to things in a way they don't quite understand, and it enlivens them, right? It's like, I don't quite understand why you're like this, but that's the part that you end up disliking about the person, their sexual weirdness or their emotionality. But it's what draws us and repels us at the same time. That's the dusting.
Very nice. I was thinking about how on the note of it's sort of the sediment of where the culture is at right now. Yeah. But in regard to that Dark City movie, it seems like it also came out around the same time as The Truman Show, or the same year as The Truman Show, and around the same time as The Matrix. And all of those things have a common denominator of recognizing that this is all not real. And it's interesting that those all popped up at the same time, and now what we have is the kind of multiverse thing of everything's a multiverse. Everything is every movie series has to have multiple things, and you can bring back nostalgic stuff, but it all gets into this plot where there's all these timelines now. And I think that's a funny little evolution from 25 years ago.
Yes. And also another movie, I haven't seen this, but a movie that came out exactly the same time was The 13th Floor. And Todd McGowan says that's even better than The Matrix. It's very good, and it's the same kind of thing. So yeah, you're interested.
Cool.
At the end of this, from Dark City, The 13th Floor, The Matrix, and The Truman Show, they're all exploring a similar issue.
Yeah, and it was all right before Y2K too. So I'm sure that had some kind of play and the anxieties that were going on. But the simulation thing of we're there's all these different programs running. It's for one, it's an idea that always sticks with the level of the technology that we have. We're always using the metaphors of technology, the current metaphors of technology, but it is the same essentially fantasy of the we're in a dream of a supreme being. Our whole lives are the dream of a turtle or whatever. It's somewhere cosmic, whatever, and it's just the same thing in different clothes, I guess. Which is
the philosopher who I actually quite like, he's an Irish, one of the few great Irish philosophers is George Berkeley, and he was the kind of true idealist, and for him, yes, we are all in the mind of God. Nothing exists, and it's actually one is a fascinating philosophical frame, but as you're saying there, it's almost like he's kind of the philosopher of today in some ways. There's definitely techno thinkers, techno posthumanists who have very similar views to Berkeley, and we should do an episode on him someday because it's fascinating, you know. Very interesting. But that idea of multiple, I was thinking when my friend was telling me about it, going like all of these multiple simulations running to get to answer the question of what is das Ding, which is the Freudian question. What is the essential black box of the other's desire? I love the metaphor when I listen to that, because I go, that it's beautiful to have a vision of a highly advanced, like absolutely like at the pinnacle of technological innovation, a society that runs millions of simulations to try to answer the fundamental question, which is, what does the other desire? I mean, that's how psychoanalysis is the fundamental question, is what does the other desire? And the fundamental insight is, I desire the other's desire. Like, if a technological civilization has to put all of their resources into millions of simulations to answer this question, it's another beautiful metaphor for how much we desire the other's desire, how much we want to be in it and to capture it and to orbit it. And I think just sometimes it's the inability to see the metaphor makes us literalize it. So I think it's very interesting. Yeah.
It's like the simulators, the supreme beings we're the NPCs, and they're the ones throwing us little diamonds and stuff, and being like, we just say the same thing, and then there's all these NPCs happening. It's beautiful.
Yeah, that's actually, I've been reading a little bit of the philosopher Fichte, and Fichte's view in a nutshell, if I can do justice to it, is he says, like, in the beginning there is an I, right? There, let's call it God, but the absolute I. It's not really God, it could be God, but he calls it the absolute I. And this absolute I conceptualizes itself. It thinks about itself. So in order to think about itself, it has to separate itself from itself. So the universe is the absolute I's self-reflection, reflection on itself. And then in that universe has given birth to I's, which are people like us, sub-egos, which are again trying to understand ourselves. So now the universe, so we now, through looking at the universe, are really understanding ourselves. So, you know, projection, everything we see in the universe is in a sense a reflection of us, and everything in the universe is a reflection of the absolute I. And that kind of means that the whole of the universe is like a computer game programmed by this absolute I that reflects it. We're the characters that this absolute I is expressing itself through. Only if you imagine a computer game where we play it for a while and then the character starts to act itself from all of the stuff we put into it, it starts to take on its own actions, but all reflecting the fact that we originally were controlling it. This is this kind of very consistent and very bizarre view of the universe, that we are the NPCs. We are the extensions of the absolute I encountering itself. Yeah.
If there's anyone listening to this and you have editing ability, please juxtapose that statement or statements that Pete just made with the gang, ha, ha, ha. Because I would like to see it side by side, and I think you can make a really great TikTok out of that, of you just being like, we're all the expression of the ultimate gang. It'd be great. But I agree with everything, I guess, that you're saying, and I've never heard of Fichte, though, but I'm Fichte, figure it out. What was I going to... I had something, actually, to...
Well, I can bounce off what you said there as well. Think about it for a second, because oh, go ahead.
The multiverse thing, the only thing I was going to say is the multiverse thing is also, I think, in line with, I don't know if it would be identity politics, but just the sheer, the sort of intersectional understanding of where we all are at right now, the postmodern kind of critique of all the factors coming in. You're this, you feel this way because you are, or I feel this way because I'm male, I feel this way because I'm white, I feel this way because I grew up in a certain area in a certain economic condition, and I have a certain orientation, and I have a certain sort of amount of whatever privileged under. I have a certain myopic viewpoint that's informed by all of these streams of existence that I sort of represent, and I sort of exist in a lattice work of. It does still seem to align with the multiverse theory that is so popular right now, where it's like there's another me that's in this particular situation. There's another me who is a little bit where this never happened, and I'm a different person because of that. So it's fun.
That's a very good point. Yes. Yeah, no, that's very good, because in this notion of the multiverse, even the fundamental principles of physics, for some people believe, are different. So yeah, you're exactly right that it does have a postmodernist vibe to it, where it's a form of historicism. It's a form, which historicism is a kind of relativism. It's a form of kind of perspectivalism, where everything is situational. Yeah, so that's very good. And of course, it's a critique of universalism, which I'm very critical of, because I'm always looking for, so what is it that's the commonality in all these different multiverses? And that's why, in terms of this metaphor of these are millions of simulations, or this multiverse of all these different possibilities, I'm going like, okay, there is something that you will find that links everything, but the reason why these aliens can't find it is it's not something positive. Every time you have something positive that you think, oh, this is it, no, that just portrays a particularity hidden in universalism. So we might say, for example, we believe in meritocracy. And then you go, yes, but hey, meritocracy has benefited some people and some groups over others. So you tear it apart. So every time you try to find a universal, you can tear it apart. But what you can't tear apart is the universal of negation itself. And eventually, in fact, you know what? The aliens might have figured it out right now in the Fundamentalists. This was the simulation where they come to understand.
Exactly.
Yeah, so there you go.
Well,
they might switch off now.
And they can send the check.
Yes.
Because if we got here from Pinky Doll, that's pretty good. Do you want to know about a weird book that I'm reading right now for fun?
Oh, please, yes.
This is, because it's somewhat related, it's called Time Loops.
Ooh.
It's all these stories about precognition, retrocausation, and the unconscious. And it's really fun tales about like people who have precognitive dreams, and then he goes into the skeptical sort of being like, here's the reasons that this doesn't work, and then he goes into all these different fun examples, and it's so much fun. This is my version of like entertainment, I guess. And I'm reading this a long time more seriously. I love it. And I was like, your buddy would love it too, because it's like this tale of like just really specific dreams that people have, and then they come true, and it's one of those things that does make you go, oh yeah, maybe it is a simulation, or maybe there is. The argument I think that he makes is not that is basically that we have a very natural but untapped ability that spans time to prepare ourselves for future events. It's so great and so science fiction-y.
Yes, I wonder. You're making me think like this is from a structuralist perspective. You could say that there's two weird things about myths, which you'll know is, one is that they're so different. Like whenever you're reading a mythology, and Levi-Strauss says this, but when you're reading mythologies, anything seems to be able to happen. The moon can have sex with the sun, some animal can talk, like anything could happen. Yeah. And then at this other extreme, they all seem really similar, right? So there's these two opposites that mythologists, that anthropologists have had to wrestle with mythology. Is they're weird, anything can happen, and yet it doesn't, and yet like there's underlying similarities. And I do wonder whether like that's what it's like with movies. You go on to Netflix, there's so many movies, but when you boil it down, action movies into their genres and certain comedies, they're actually quite similar. And in a similar way, we can have dreams that come true, because there's not that many things that can happen. If you know what I mean, like that our dreams, when you look at the underlying structures, there's only only so many things can happen in our lives. So if someone dreams of a particular thing and it happens, I'm going like, it would be more weird if that didn't happen. But that's the skeptic in me, you know.
That is that's the law of large numbers, I
Yes,
think is what he
yes.
refers to it as. And then it goes into that, which is very fun. But it is, you can't, it's like plain, like I've had so many plain dreams over the years, and only recently, I haven't had one in like maybe a couple years. And then like last week I had one where I was like back in a plane, and I was like, I woke up and I was like, oh, fun, another plane. I was like, I wonder what that's about. It's like the only type of recurring dream that one of the only types I've ever had. And I was like, man, there's so much, planes are such a motif in dreams that it's not uncommon for that to happen. And so it's just, also it's like, oh, I wonder what triggered that again. But anyway, that's beside the point.
Well, I had a good example. A good friend of mine, he was telling me about this study that they did and so what happened in the study is the experimenter got a series of crosswords that had not been done before, had never been done, and a series of crosswords that had been done before in a national newspaper. So it had been done by hundreds of thousands of people, if not more. And they did this experiment in a controlled group, and the crosswords that nobody had ever done before, the group found harder to do. But the crossword puzzles that millions of people had done before, they found up to 20% easier to do. And this is this idea of, collective unconscious, we're taking in, these have been done, we're pulling in this stuff. So he told me about this, and sadly I did my whole thing of going, study doesn't exist. And he's like, no, it does. The study doesn't exist. And yeah, sure enough, it doesn't exist. It's it floats around. It floats around as if it exists, but it doesn't exist.
Like a meme.
It's like a meme. It was in the Linklater film. Yeah.
One of the things, this was a similar thing where it's a study, and I'm not going in with a fine-tooth comb on this stuff, and so I'm probably going to butcher this, but it was something, a similar thing, controlled environment. And they were asking, like, I don't know if it was a multiple choice thing, but it was something about maybe the meaning of words, like very obscure words that you wouldn't have heard of. And they tried to get people to sort of say what they mean or something. It maybe wasn't that, because I can already see how that wouldn't work. It was something a little bit more convincing. But they found out afterward, they would learn what some of those words were. And when they went through, they were better at knowing the words that they were going to find out later.
Yeah, so that would be
fun?
That would be fun. And this is where I go like, there's these really interesting studies that generally tend not to exist. So I go like, I want to see it. I'll have to look into that.
This is so fun.
Yeah.
This is Pete. We gotta hang out, because this is one of my favorite things to do, is say things where I can tell that you're trying to nicely say bullshit, but you're not saying bullshit, but you're kind of like, how do I probably doesn't exist, probably not real. What's the you can explain, you finally know how to explain UFOs and ghosts, what people see when they see them, they don't, or whatever.
That's right. Yes, you can always tell if someone's seen a UFO. They haven't,
because they didn't.
They didn't.
That's great.
I had the funny thing is, so I have a friend who she was working with somebody who's a kind of guru figure and does this kind of interesting form of therapy. And I don't know actually I'm going to tell you the story and we'll find out what happens. But this figure wrote to her with just a very short email and said something about a particular plant that he thought might mean something to her. And he said, I don't know why I'm writing this to you. I just, I think this might mean something. And she thought about it and she was like, actually, you know what? A family member of mine, very close, a parent who that plant was very important to. And they were, of course, very surprised by this email and potentially all the more drawn into what this person is doing. But obviously the question I had is, well, that's very interesting, but would there be anywhere online that would be seen? And she's like, no. And she's like, well, my parent did have a very obscure blog, and they did blog about horticulture It's like, and I'm not saying, but I'm just going, it's best to be skeptical. And the reason why I said that is not to burst bubbles. It's to go, there is a basic principle. It doesn't hold for everything. So people notice it doesn't hold for everything, but the greater the claim, the more the evidence. And it's a Humean claim.
Who was it that said that?
David Hume, I think, he's famous for it anyway. But David Hume is very famous for kind of evidentialism, and you know, if I come in
positivism.
He's kind of like a forerunner actually of positivism, and this is why, you know, you can poke holes in it, because positivism you can poke holes in it, but evidentialism is a good kind of rule of thumb. And if I come to you and I say, oh my, Elliott, I nearly got hit by a car on the way to your house, you go, like, okay, because there's loads of cars, and you're like, yeah, it could have happened. But if I say, Elliott, I nearly got eaten by a crocodile on the way to your house, you would reasonably, even though you like me and I'm your friend, you reasonably could say, like, have you got any evidence for that? Just because the claim is kind of, it's a bigger claim, and so in the same way, I'm always trying to get people to go, the bigger the claim, the more the evidence. Doesn't mean you don't believe it. It just means that, but weirdly, we can be the opposite. Weirdly, people can sometimes be the bigger the claim, the less the evidence.
This is one of those things where you can believe multiple things at the same time and stay very... I've had this issue with some of my pals regarding some of the alien stuff, where people, like, it is okay to say probably not 100% of the time, and also still be like, what if, it's fun. But people don't like doing that. They want to be like, no, it convinced me, this is it, and you can be guilty of it, but you can hold things. You can just hold the things in your head.
I love how you believe. I love how you can believe something absolutely, and then with just a little smile, you know, you go like, there's a little smile that goes, my goodness, you're holding those two things simultaneously, enjoying the belief and yet also holding it lightly. And that's it. Yeah, isn't that love in a way? Like, you completely trust somebody, and yet, of course, know that maybe you can't, like, they're a human being. It can't, like, there's a certain thing where you give yourself wholly to something and simultaneously can have questions. Oh, and on that, what about the Mexican aliens? Give me an update. Any?
Dude, I'm fascinated by this. This will come out by the time I'm sure it's done. The amount of people who still are like believing that these things are real is tough, because I don't believe that they are in any sense, but they did take it to medical people who, I guess, x-rayed and said that these were real bodies that have not been assembled. And people are believing it, and it's like, the guy is a hoax. He's a hoaxer, and it's really fascinating. Maybe there'll be actual aliens, but it certainly seems, apparently too, in the video, they're like passing around this this alien mummy. Somebody said they pass it around like a bong, like they're just like holding it up like a stiff doll. And like, normally if you see archaeologists, they're so gingerly about it, and they're like gentle, and these people are just like holding it up like, there you go. And it's so great, dude. It is the best development. It is gonna, it makes it so ludicrous and absurd, and that part sucks, because I don't like when it muddies the water in an already ambiguous, ridiculous world. But I guess the guy's just doubling down, and now they're getting sued by Peru for probably robbing graves. So
I heard about that. Yes.
Does not get better than that. I'm like, this is one of those things where I see it and I'm like, I'm invested, but I also kind of want to write a movie about it that is like Veep, or the British version. What's the British version?
In the Thick of It.
In the Thick of It, yeah, like that. There's so much stuff here with UFOs that is so funny, but it's great.
In the Thick of It,
and hopefully they're real.
Good. Yeah. And in the Thick of It series about UFO aliens, and that would be hilarious. That would be brilliant.
I love it. Yeah. Not to say that it's not all real, but man, because it's just the willingness of people to believe, I think, is pretty wild. But who knows? Maybe it's real, Pete. That's the other side. Who knows? We don't know. I haven't gotten my hands on it yet.
Great. Well, here, do you have a takeaway for the NPC? And I'll do a wee takeaway.
I love the NPC trend. I think it's a great example of TikTok. I hope everybody gets involved with it. At least look it up once or twice just to see. It will make your IQ maybe drop a little bit, but at the same time, there's something incredibly fascinating about it. And I think it's great. And I think the internet, if this is where we're at now, God knows where we're going to be at in 10 years, but I'll probably dream about it anyway. So thanks.
Very good. And this conversation has kind of led me back to that old German idealist idea that, maybe we're all NPCs, or what we can see in the NPC is we can ask ourselves the question, to what extent are we sometimes the vessel of unthinking ideas that we pass on, that we imbibe from
how many times a day
corporations? Yes, exactly. And now with algorithms and, how much are we, in terms of our belief about, political issues and cultural issues, how much are we being fed a certain vision that we then kind of propagate and don't even know that we're NPCs? So, like, in some respects, it's kind of good to look at someone like Pinky Doll and go, okay, to what extent am I Pinky Doll? To what extent are we all like that? Is there a way to break free of that? Or is there at least a way for me to subjectively be more involved in my beliefs, to kind of try to do more of the heavy lifting? I think those are all really good questions. It's kind of like, and maybe we're all NPCs and there's nothing we can do, but definitely there's elements where we become vessels for the big other. We become unthinking receptacles.
Like megaphones.
Megaphones for that. And, one of my worries about society at the moment is we actually lack a coherent big other. So Levi-Strauss talks about these things called zero institutions. And from what I understand about a zero institution is it's an institution that doesn't exist, but it kind of, you triangulate it, it exists in a virtual way, in the sense of, in Ireland, everyone buys a round of drinks. There's a very sophisticated grammar of when you buy a round, when you don't. How much money have you got? Do you not have very much money? Then you would buy maybe less rounds than someone who had more money. There's a whole grammar around it. There's no institution that guards those rules. You will not find an institution that says this is the rules of how to buy a round of drinks. But you kind of know it. That's a zero institution. It kind of doesn't exist. It insists. And I think we're missing zero institutions, which is where we all are unified around unthinking things. So in Ireland, we're all NPCs when it comes to buying a round. I don't have to think about it. I go into a bar, I know what to do. It only messes up if a tourist comes and doesn't know the rules. So in a way, being an NPC is not always a bad thing. We kind of need some zero institutions sometimes that unify us all. A good example I read once was during a protest. This woman was running away from a police officer. I don't know where the protest was. It wasn't in America, but it was a protest. She was running away, and the police officer was running after her to arrest her. And she was wearing heels, and her ankle went, and her shoe fell off. And she kept running, and the police officer stopped and picked up her shoe, and she stopped, and he handed it to her. And that's an example of a zero institution, is that in the midst of all of this chaos of, there's the protester, whether right or wrong, there's the police officer, right or wrong, this is all going on. But then there was this thing that they both shared, which was, the woman's shoe fell off and he picked it up, was chivalrous and gave it back. And in that moment of the zero institution being enacted, unconsciously as an NPC, it's just kind of like you just did it. A moment happened, she wasn't arrested, and something else could occur.
Very human.
Yeah, very human. So we are missing, even Thanksgiving in America might be a zero institution of sorts, where no matter whether you're conservative or liberal, you get round that table and you all give thanks. But today, even that has been destroyed. I think even that is being under threat. So there's a good and a bad side to being an NPC. And maybe this episode we can we've brought some of that up.
My favorite time of being an NPC, I love it. It's when I'm at Target and I'm checking out, or I'm at buying anything from a cashier, and you do the game where you go, "How are you doing? Doing good. How are you doing? Right? I love that script, and I will ride that horse until I die. I love I love the exchange that both of us know that we don't give a shit, and we're just hello, yep, thank you so much, and it's like there's a comfort in that, and I enjoy it very much. I don't
That's
go
an
into the whole
American
thing.
one.
People are like, you don't really want to know how my day is going. I don't care. I don't
No.
want you. I don't want you to want to care how I'm doing.
Yes, it's a zero institution, and that's a great example because as a non-American, at first I didn't understand that because it was an NPC thing. You guys just do it naturally, but first time I go into a shop and the shopkeeper asks, "Oh, how are you doing?" I'm like, "What?
What do you want?
You know,
What do I do?
you want to do?" And I'd start telling them about my day. Oh well, had a bit of a tough day actually. I really appreciate you asking. Do you have time to sit down and have a chat about it? So that's a zero institution, and you just made me think of another one as well. That's a beautiful one that is under threat a little bit. I forget, but yeah, but that's a beautiful example of like something that in America you all do, and in a little brief moment it brings you all together, and it's an unthinking thing.
Yeah, very nice. Well, thank you everybody for listening to this episode of the Fundamentalists. I hope you enjoyed it, and feel free to leave us comments. Let us know what you think about it. Please feel free to stitch together some of Pete's highlights here with Pinky Doll, because I think they're a match made in the simulation. So thanks,
I thought of the other. I'll give you this one because it's my favorite. In Ireland, it's you always refuse food twice, and you accept food the third time. Yeah, and that's so when I first went to America, that's a zero institution. No one tells you to do it, but you always do it. It's like, oh, would you like something to eat? Oh no, I'm fine. Oh seriously? Oh no, I couldn't. I'm absolutely stuffed. Seriously, would you have something? Oh yeah, I'm famished, right? And then when you go to America and they don't know that institution, it's like, would you like some food? And you go, oh no, I couldn't. I'm absolutely stuffed. And they're like, okay. You're like, how rude. What are you doing? Like, you have to ask me 3 times. So that's again a zero institution. In Ireland, you didn't even know. I didn't even know it existed until I went to another culture.
Yeah.
And then I was like, oh, what happened there? And those zero institutions, I think, are important. Anyway, that's great. I really like this conversation.
It was very nice. I remember one time, I think we were living together, and you offered something, and I was like, do you need me to say no twice, or can I just say yes?
Yes.
I will take one of your snacks. But anyway, cool. All right, thanks everybody.
Take care. Bye-bye.